Hey everybody, and welcome to Thursday Thermal Takes, where we slash the most thermal of napes with the most Thursday of blades. This is probably going to be the first, and absolutely not the last, incredibly contentious take that I do. We're getting into the really hot, like the ghost pepper sauce levels of hot takes here. We're going to sort of be kicking off a mini-series within Thursday Thermal Takes that I'd like to call the Four Horsemen of the Overrate Apocalypse. Editor Chan's probably going to be shaking her head at that name, because it's just pretty cringe. But these will be episodes where I describe how 4 of the last decade's most popular anime are far more appreciated and well received in some cases than is justified. This episode, as the title suggests, will be crapping on Attack on Titan, although not too much. I'm not trying to be too much of a jerk. Before we get into that, though, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications, and comment what topics you'd like me to cover in the future. And also, do understand when I say that something is overrated, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, just means it's been overhyped or overpraised. Before the major points of this, I'd like to get into the narrative, the world, and the characters of the story. A lot of people didn't like the animation quality for the Titans and some of the fight scenes. That's to be expected with a lot of anime. I myself actually don't like the specific art style. I find it sometimes kind of gritty, ugly, or kind of a downer when watching an anime, but supposedly has a bad ending from the manga. I'm not 100% done. I'm pretty much caught up for the anime, and the anime still has a couple episodes left, so I don't know the really bad ending from the manga that disappointed everyone, but that's not really being considered here. It had a 4-year hiatus between the first and second seasons. Then it had a 12-episode second season, which had about 25 for the first. And then a third 2 years later, which was split into 2 parts with a 1-year gap in between. And then about a year and a half after that, a final season, quote-unquote final, that was also split into 2 parts. It's just kind of a mess for scheduling. You've got Mikasa Ackerman looking like a total potato after the time skip. A lot of people didn't like that. But what we'll be focusing on really are the 3 essential parts of the story to understand why Attack on Titan, I would say, isn't one of the greatest animes of all time, like many people would. Point 1 is going to be kind of the narrative of the story. It starts out fairly strong for the first several episodes, with the majority of the first season spending time introducing other characters, and kind of culminates in the most predictable plot twist. The second season is a lot more of the same, with some betrayals, some character development. And the third has like some history stuff, and it all culminates in this big deadly battle. It reveals answers to a lot of questions, and climaxes the narrative for what I thought, as was structured. Eren Yeager, the protagonist, has achieved every general objective in the story that was clearly defined throughout the first season, the second season, and so on. And pretty much all of the major series building secrets are revealed up to that point. However, the final season, which continues everything, it shifts perspectives to a completely new place that we haven't seen before. There's like a large time skip that happens several years. There's a lot of tone changes, all this new stuff, a new country, a few of the characters that we knew before that were not originally from where Eren is from. But it essentially just feels like a new story where eventually the 2 worlds kind of collide for an exchange that leads to the grand and final conflict of the series, while trying to balance both Eren's perspective and Gabby's. This plot doesn't drag on too much, but often the pacing from episode to episode kind of changes drastically based on whether or not there's a lot of military conflict or Titan fighting, or all of the conversations and sort of the political or ideological exchanges. Or I don't think that it really is that well paced in that sense, because it fits a lot better in a film style where you have, like, if you had 5 or 6 of these all in a row and you had a movie. But 20-minute weekly chunks is kind of weird, because you'll spend 1 week watching not very plot-heavy stuff, and then you'll spend another week not wanting to stop watching. You're just going to want every potato chip afterwards. In addition, the lack of clear direction, juggling and pausing all the different plot threads that happen, because it sort of shifts from one part of the story to another, doesn't have clearly defined arcs. It's because you have all these plot lines that just take a backbench. Because of this, I'd say there may be 2 or 3 not very clearly definable arcs. And then obviously the arc at the end after the time lapse. The last season pretty much feels like a different anime for the first half of it. I think actually works better. I'd say season 4 was probably the best part. I'd say that the plot twists are also somewhat inconsistent. You have the one at the end of season 1, which was incredibly predictable, some through season 2, which were predictable. The ones in season 4, one of them just completely hits you out of left field and mind blows you. Then there's a plot twist that's kind of like, well, I kind of predicted this. It's not super consistent in how aspects of the plot are. Some aspects of the plot are much better than others. I would say a good but bumpy narrative altogether. Not exactly the GOAT level. After watching it, you can still appreciate it a lot. I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. Number 2, we're going to do world. The world refers to both the actual world that the story takes place in, as well as the concepts, the world building concepts, which further shape and define the story. The world Attack on Titan takes place in is completely fictional, but it takes significant inspiration from, I would say, German 1800s, probably about sums it up, with some of the weird weaponry. It's got different circular walls layered outside of different zones, and at least until the final season's arc, we don't really know about anything beyond that world. We know that there are Titans out there, we know that there's an ocean out there, but we never really get to any of that until the end of season 3. The geography ends up being somewhat clearly defined as like these island nations and continents that are somewhat separate from one another. That kind of helps explain why we didn't really see any of the other areas. Each episode has a mid-roll fact card as well that describes like weapons, strategies, and the geography, whatever plot relevant stuff is happening at the moment. You have a whole bunch of Titans and weapons and locations that you learn about. You're able to discover some things, but they don't add a ton of new depth to the series. It just kind of like new mechanics for what's going on. I would say that the world of Attack on Titan is pretty fleshed out and can immerse a viewer very well, but doesn't offer a lot in variety and creativity. A lot of the colors are the same. It's a lot of green and gray, just kind of forests and buildings, which isn't always a bad thing, but it keeps the world aspect fairly simple. I would say overall the Attack on Titan has a good world. I'd give it about an 8 out of 10. And then the final point is going to be the characters, and oh boy, some spicy takes here. I would say that the strength of a series is really often epitomized by the cast of characters and the development of those characters. Attack on Titan falls very short in many of these aspects. The quality of the said characters and the way that they develop, like whether or not you feel like these characters are important, whether or not you like or relate to the characters, it kind of craps out at that point. And to those who know the series pretty well, pretty much the only quality characters seem to be one of the following groups. A, the people who possess Titan abilities, which there are only 9 of. And even amongst them, it's not always great. Or B, you could be an Ackerman, because all 3 of the relevant Ackermans are pretty good characters. Or C, you could be characters like kind of the exceptional ones, like Gabby, the second protagonist. You have Erwin and Hanji. I would say that even with all those parameters, not all the Titan holders are particularly great. The Jaw Titan holder, the second one from the new country, the female Titan holder, and then the first holder of the Colossal Titan, they all really don't have a ton of great personality. I would say that Sasha and Connie, 2 of the main sort of cast characters that are with you along for the whole ride, they're pretty terrible. They don't really have any kind of great backstory or fleshed out anything. There's not a lot of emotional anything that I can put into them. And of course, the worst offender of all of this stuff in terms of characters, Eren Yeager, at least during seasons 1 through 3. My biggest problem with Attack on Titan, and that it's afflicted with SAPS, or what I'd like to call sucky-ass protagonist syndrome. SAPS is when a series has a very bland or overwhelmingly lame protagonist who just doesn't do it any favors. I'd say Eren Yeager fulfills that role for seasons 1 through 3 of the anime. He has only determination, occasional self-doubt, and some mild stoicism as personality traits. Doesn't really go very far beyond that. Just kind of like every other similar protagonist of general mediocrity. This does change a lot towards the end of the story. Obviously, in the 4th season, there's a lot of amazing stuff that happens in terms of his character development. It just kind of makes Eren, for the most part, feel like the guy version of a Mary Sue, just kind of being gifted, naturally good at everything he has to do. Not very likable or interesting. With the lack of likable or good characters, I'd maybe say about 12 to 15 out of the 100+ characters in the series. I can say many good things about other aspects of the series, but I can't say a whole lot of good things about the cast with a few exceptions. I'd say that Levi is really the only amazing character anyway. I'll give it a 6 out of 10 in terms of characters, which averages everything out to 7.5 out of 10, which is really good. Kind of, like I said, not an all-time great, as many people proclaim Attack on Titan to be. Anyway, did you really hate or like this roast, or do you disagree, or how do you feel about this? It's a pretty spicy one for me. Even though the series is called Thursday Thermal Takes, it probably should be a little bit more contentious. Be sure to comment down below or like or dislike the video to show your feelings about it. Once again, hit the subscribe and the bell for notifications to see more based Thursday Thermal Takes on Japanese media. Check out my other Attack on Titan video, the Attack on Titan character tier list from a couple days ago that I did, and I'll see you next Thursday.